Today on the podcast, I have Chris Brisson. Chris is the co-founder and CEO of Salesmsg, which is a leading AI-powered SMS platform designed to help businesses engage, qualify, and convert leads through two-way messaging. He was previously the co-founder of Call Loop, one of the earliest kind of voice and text broadcasting platforms. And he's done quite a bit. And so this is kind of a fun conversation talking about his entrepreneurial journey, some of the lessons learned. And maybe one of the things I think I really appreciated about his discussion on this podcast was just his growth mentality, growth mindset. If he didn't know something, he went out and figured it out. And so I think that is a key theme for all of the entrepreneurial activities that Chris has been involved in. And it created really a fun conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Chris, welcome to the podcast, man. I appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, good. Well, why don't we start with a little bit about just your entrepreneurial journey and what you're doing today?
Yeah. Oh boy, that's a large question. So
that's a loaded one.
Should I start from the beginning? How far back would you like me to go to?
Whatever you think is relevant. Give me a 3-4 minute kind of intro to how you ended up where you're at today.
Yeah. So I accidentally became an entrepreneur. So long story short, I was 18. I had a Mustang. I wanted wheels for my car, like every Fast and the Furious kid. This is like 2000. Yeah. 2000 is a long time ago, right? So I called up a wholesaler and I acted as if I needed wheels for a customer. And so he's like, "Yeah, come on down. It's $468. Bring cash." So I brought cash, drove to Miami, got these wheels, put them on my car. The next day I went to college. 2 years later, I'm broke. I can't pay my $250 third room rent. And my friend's like, "Hey, why don't you sell your wheels?" Okay, why don't you sell your wheels on eBay? And so I checked out eBay. I'm like, holy cow. Those wheels that I got at wholesale, I wasn't even like a real company. I was just a kid just buying rims for $468. These guys are selling these for $1,000. Okay, wow. I think I'm in business. And so
markup.
Markup. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can make like $500 a set. This is great. So I remember talking to my dad. I'm like, "Dad, what do I do?" He's like, "You got to get a business license. You got to do this. You got to do all this sort of stuff," which, today you wouldn't do any of that. A lot of the things that had to do that. So long story short, I ended up starting this company. I sold wheels and tires on eBay and built a website, and sold that company in 2005. And basically just said, "Hey, I don't want to be in the inventory game." I had a 3-bay warehouse. I had inventory I got broken into. And so from that, after I sold that, I really went down to learn let me learn sales and marketing and learn Zig Ziglar and Dan Kennedy and writing copy and just everything I could about how do you sell, how do you market, and then more importantly, how do you market online. So just went down that path. I created courses, I wrote ebooks, I did consulting, I did a ton of things just to learn. That was in my 20s of I had the pleasure to just go deep and learn everything I could. I had to learn how to create web pages. So I'm hopping into Dreamweaver and Photoshop and, all the fun stuff there. And lo and behold, what I really attached to is I really like building software. And so I built a couple little products here and there. I launched a company in the end of 2009 called Call Loop. That still exists today. That's like a messaging calling platform. And then, in 2015, I wasn't truly happy with that company. So I remember walking into my office and I'm just I can't keep doing this business. And so ultimately I spun out Salesmsg from the ashes of sort of burning that business down. It still exists. Again, it's not like it's burnt, but essentially starting Salesmsg from that. And that was in 2017. So
that's pretty interesting. And, I don't think you're, unusual from that standpoint. I guess one of the things that I take away from your story is you had a goal about getting better, and then you just went and figured out the tools and the process to get there, and learn. And so the amount of resources that are on the web anymore, if you're motivated, is just unreal, right? You can take classes in just about anything for free. And so I think what most people are lacking is a goal and a motivation. And so I think what you did was you aligned, I want to get better at sales and marketing. And you said, I'm just going to go get a bunch of resources and do it. And
Yeah.
I always thought about like college is like, maybe that was the best experience I got out of college was to teach myself, right? If I could teach myself the things I needed to learn, that degree was well worth it no matter what you got a degree in. And so, and I think as entrepreneurs, that's one of the things that teaches you that like pays for itself because you have to do that over and over and over again.
Yeah. Like what I just loved about the process was just learning. Like I got the ability to just try a bunch of stuff, to learn a bunch of things, to, I learned how to write copy. I, created a best-selling ebook and I wrote the sales letter and I wrote the whole upsell process. And, to me, it was just awesome. I got the ability to really to try some things. And so, there's a great quote. I really love it today. And so it is, problems are secret calls to adventure. And so when I look at my entrepreneur journey, I'm like, man, what were these problems that I really was called to follow? And they were my own problems. They were my own sort of issues that I was having, whether my business, I wrote this book, after I left college. I had a horrible credit. And I remember I was in Banana Republic. This is like 2006 or something. And, it's Christmas time. And I get to the counter and the girl's like, hey, do you want to save 20% on your order? I'm like, oh, like I've done that. I know what the whole thing is. Going. Right. I'm like, you know what? And I know my credit was bad because I was getting denied for anything. And so I'm like, fine, let's do it. Maybe this time will be different. And so she ran my credit and she's like, sorry, there's like 30 people behind me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even get a Banana Republic credit card. So I was like, all right, let me fix this. So I hired a company and like 6 months later, they did nothing. And I thought like, well, yeah, they're not going to really do anything. They just want me to keep paying month in, month out. So they're incentivized to actually move as slow as possible. I got to figure this out. So I bought a bunch of books. I just went super deep and just went down that. And through that, I ended up raising my credit score and wrote a book about it and documented the whole process. So, it's like those problems really become the opportunity. And so just through that problem, I created a pretty cool business and just learned a ton. So, and all these problems.
What's embedded in that though, Chris, is you weren't afraid to fail, and like your perception of success is different than others, right? So my first startup, it was a trash can fire, right? Like I basically, I didn't understand sales and distribution. And so, I sold my car to make payroll. I got out of my apartment to make payroll. I cut my salary to make payroll, and I still didn't make it work. And so, and so people look at that and say, well, man, that was a disaster. But you're like, I never made that mistake again, right? And so I guess the point I'm trying to bring out of this is you saw learning in all of those experiments where other people would say, like some of that's failure. And I do think that's another key element of great entrepreneurs is they don't really care. They see value in an experiment that failed. They learned something and they applied it to the next one.
Yeah. I guess that's just how I've always looked at it is like, I'm just going to try. I'm going to figure it out. And whether it works or not, it's going to be fun. And I'm going to figure it out and document it. And, I think again, like just that quote for me has really just stood up for my whole life because, while some people again see that problem and they can wallow in the problem, they'll never try and figure it out. On the other side, it is the opportunity to like go deep. You can talk to experts. And I remember I reached out to all these experts that were experts in their industry. And I'm like, how in the world am I ever going to get these people on the phone? And I did just because I went out and tried to solve the problem. They were sort of enrolled in helping solve that problem. So I really think that, those that get excited and ambitious to solve these larger problems, they will attract the people that will help solve it. And so, that's certainly been true for Salesmsg and, just enrolling and building the team that we have today. So it's just exciting. I don't know. I enjoy it because it unlocks opportunity to do things that you may not have wanted to do before or had the capacity to do before.
Sure. So let's start with Salesmsg. Tell me a little bit about what the company is and like what problem you're really solving and how you got into it.
Yeah. So Salesmsg, today it's a conversational text messaging calling platform. So, I would consider ourselves the best of breed texting platform for sales, marketing, customer support departments, right, in businesses. And so Before, in my previous company, Call Loop, it was really focused on one-way outbound calling, outbound text messaging. And what I was really wanting and what our customers were wanting is, hey, how do I create like a more two-way texting or conversational platform? And so, through Call Loop and just understanding that customer really what they wanted, we went out and really just built this sort of separate platform that does that. So we integrate really well into HubSpot, Salesforce, all the major CRMs, marketing automation tools, because that's where I'd consider modern day businesses they're at, right? They're in HubSpot. They have their sales team, their marketing team in there, and messaging, really is the way that that we engage today. Before it was calling and email, and those channels, are just not as effective. And SMS is, from a consumer perspective, a great way to engage, right? And from a business perspective, it's a great way to engage as well. So, yeah, we built a really phenomenal product, and that's really been, just one of the keys to our growth is just solving all these problems that a sales team, a sales manager, a large company, a small company, they would have around how to scale texting, how to use texting, how do we use it to, deploy to team. And so it's a pretty robust tool, but, we're SMS first. We also got a pretty phenomenal calling product, but we're not known for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have more customers kind of in a B2B model or a B2C, or it's a pretty good mix?
Yeah, it's mostly, look, we are B2B, right? We serve businesses, not consumers, but we serve all types of different companies. So we do Tony Robbins, right? And we do, a couple of those properties. We work with franchises. We work with, F45 and Terminex, and we work with, small businesses. But most of it is, small, medium-sized companies that either they have a lead to speed to lead problem, right? So in lead engagement, so they're generating leads, and the ways in which they're generating those leads and trying to engage with them, with calling and email is not working, and so now they can inject SMS to literally have that conversation instantly. So we haven't moved enterprise. We will certainly, like we're probably going to do that later this year, if not next year. But really just nailing the SMB mid-market. We have a lot of multi-location companies that just scale across, all their locations and franchises. So yeah, that's a good sweet spot. And, we're one of the major, top apps in HubSpot. So if you use HubSpot and you're looking for text messaging, you would use something like Salesmsg, and it integrates really well into that CRM. So anywhere in the platform, there's a lot of really cool things you can do with it. So like automations and workflows and such.
So with like any other marketing, though, it's the content, right? Obviously, you have to have the platform to communicate. And I do think that you're probably right that the email is different than the texting, but the quality of the integration, or not the integration, but the communication and the content that you're providing is a big component of that. So maybe talk to me a little bit about how traditional, let's say like email campaigns where you got call to actions and you got a progression that you're doing. How do people rethink using text? Is there elements of that you leverage in content discussions to build engagement, or is it a totally different engagement model because of the channel?
Yeah. I like to say that everyone is already a pro because they've been doing it for 20, 30 years, right? Like texting's been around for a really long time. So we know the medium. The biggest mistake people make is saying, hey, I'm going to, the same way that we're writing email copy, let's sort of copy paste, and now let's bring it over to text messaging. And so, SMS really is a relationship channel. It's an intimate channel. It's not a spam channel. It's really a connector channel. And so, it's you can use it for that mass messaging, SMS marketing, which drives, high conversion rates. But if you're looking on the engagement side, it really is the same way that we would text. So we have a framework in the company. And so, it's philosophy, methodology, and then technology. And the philosophy is it's a belief we have, which is conversations are good for business. And by driving more conversations, we can help businesses grow. And so the way in which we help businesses create more conversations is through a framework and a methodology called textize your business. And what that means is messaging and texting can play a part in the entire life cycle. So you can use it to generate leads with keywords or text to join or QR code or swipe up to text, or web forms, and engage, right? Whether two-way texting manually or enroll into an AI agent that will have a conversation to qualify, capture data, push it to your CRM, book meetings, drive revenue through SMS marketing or promotional texting, get feedback through like NPS scores, get reviews, and get referrals, right? So the whole cycle, you can add messaging across that. And so one of the problems people have is they drive meetings, and the biggest problem is getting people to show up, right? Or at least they have a no-show problem. And with a simple text message, you can increase it by 20%, right? There's no campaign to create. There's no, you got to write a whole sequence to do that. It's just, hey, if we send a text message the morning of or the day of, it will increase by 10 to 15%. So these little tiny little texts along the way can make, can have a dramatic effect.
So maybe I guess my question maybe was naive a little bit from the standpoint of how much of this is being done from a demand gen, top of the funnel sales engagement versus the rest of the customer life cycle. Because I agree, like the use cases you're just talking about, all the way through the life cycle are pretty compelling. I think when some of these people think about it, is it used as part of a demand gen tool with other channels? And are you really getting value, creating value for them in that discussion, or is it to drive to a specific action?
Yeah. So, we like to say there's 4 parts to it. And so you have capture, connect, convert, and care. So SMS can be used as, a lead gen mechanism, right? So from the demand gen side, you're not going to cold text, right? So you're not going to import a list and then just start texting random people. It's not going to go well. Plus, it's illegal. And so from a capture perspective is, hey, you're driving leads on Facebook. Awesome. Also get their email and get their phone number and engage with them over SMS immediately, right? Why? Well, they're right there. So go right to an SMS conversation. If someone fills out a web form or books a demo, go right to an SMS conversation. If you're using social media, people can, click a link and open up their SMS app and go right into an SMS conversation. They could, if you're a speaker and, you're in front of an audience and you want to convert that audience into leads, they could scan a QR code or text a phone number with a keyword and instantly get right into an SMS conversation, which you can capture a name, an email, room size, paint color, whatever you want, right? And so people already have these assets in the business. They just never have used messaging as a tool to really engage. And so that's what Salesmsg does really well, right? If you're collecting orders, right, you're already collecting a phone number, but what are you doing with it, right? Turn it into an asset. Now you've got a list of customers that you can continue to market to, engage with, and grow the business. So, that's just sort of one part of it. But again, businesses are already doing these things. How do you turn it into and convert into, an SMS conversation, which again gets the highest engagement?
What do you think? I mean, do people already have a bunch of ideas when they come to you, or is it kind of an education on, hey, look, you've given me a bunch of templates or kind of theories or ideas or scenarios that really work, and they're like, oh, well, I came to you for a specific one, but you've just shown me 4 more. Is that how it goes? It just seems like it's not a channel that people really inherently think about, and maybe they come to you saying, I have one idea, whether it's maybe like the appointment setting component, that really makes a lot of sense to me because I'm burning cycles, and then you kind of expand and say, hey, look, there's probably 6 other places in my business this would be valuable.
Yeah, you got it. Most people come to us with a primary problem, right? Or a primary use case. Hey, we have a lead engagement problem. Awesome. Here's how we can do it. We can set that up. And, again, sort of in this textized framework, it unlocks all the opportunity. You can do it here. Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Are you doing that? And, obviously on the front end of it, you can start to add all these different strategy tactics to, generate leads. But most people already have these systems set up. They really want the engagement side to, book a meeting. So, we just launched this AI agent, booking agent. And the idea with that is, hey, look, the current way in which you're booking meetings is you're generating a lead. Maybe you're driving right to a Calendly and they're booking a meeting. But they book a call, you're running it through an SDR. SDR is trying to call, they're sending an email, they're trying to get them on the phone, right, to just qualify. And so you have this sort of long pause. And so that's sort of the messy middle, if you will. Well, now you can put them right into an AI agent that speaks in your brand, speaks in your tone, has a conversation, it's human-like, and it will qualify and ask the questions that you want to get. And once it has that, it will actually book it on Calendly or in HubSpot meetings and book it. So you go from, hey, generate leads, send the leads in your AI agent, and it's going to do the booking. It'll do the rescheduling. If they want to cancel or redo it, it will handle that whole process. And it just makes again, that part of that business for booking meetings very efficient. And you get rid of a lot of that messy middle. You so augment it with calling and having your SDR, but now SMS can take a part of making that easier.
And do you think the prospect on the other end looks at it and says, I'm not having to be chased. It's done on my kind of terms.
Yeah.
And this is pretty easy to go do and interface with. And, if I want to walk away, I walk away. If I want to move forward, I schedule the time. And so it puts more control in the prospect's hands.
Yeah, totally. I mean, look, the challenge when you have a growing business or you're generating leads and your volume increases is on the other side of text messaging is a human that needs to respond. Well, what if they're busy? What if they're dealing with 15 other conversations? And that erodes pretty quick. And especially on SMS is, man, you need to have a real-time conversation in order to move through the pipe. AI plays a huge part in that. And at the end of the day, it's really about the consumer experience. Right? When they have a question, they want to get a response. When they're active and they're texting, you want to have a conversation immediately, not, hey, they're going to text and then an hour later they get another response. And so you really want it to lean into, when they want to engage and connect. And that can be 24/7. So, one of the cool things you can upload basically, your documentation. So your website, feed we have basically your AI brain or your knowledge base. So you can feed the AI agent all the information and it has all the knowledge, right? And so if you ever ask it questions over SMS, it will respond. You can always customize it, add to it, and sort of further refine that. But, at the end of the day, that's what the consumer wants. And, that for sure will be in the future as more and more people just get more accustomed to getting questions answered quickly. Waiting on the phone for 30 minutes to talk to somebody. Why not talk to an AI agent that can answer that? And so the timeline for sort of this human engagement is quickly sort of getting there. I hate to say it, but AI agents are quicker, faster, better, easier.
Yeah.
And not that they will displace humans, but really there is this call to move closer to the customer to help them.
I agree with all that. I think the one thing that we're seeing is, do you have enough unique content that's in a way that you can actually train agents to do what to talk on your behalf in an intelligent value add way? And so you see a lot of organizations, certainly bigger organizations, that have a lot of siloed information. And so I think building inference databases that work with LLMs to kind of do some of this and surface that information is great. But if you don't start with really good content, you're going to have a poor experience. And so, as you're talking with small and mid-sized companies, again, a lot of this is locked up in a handful of people's brains, and it's tribal knowledge, right? And so they train, they do all these things. Is there an issue on getting it documented in a structured way so that the agents can actually leverage it in a conversational way that adds value?
Yeah, the AI agents that most of our customers create have one sort of set goal. Hey, book a call, right? Yeah. So the universe of possible questions they're not very deep. However, if you wanted to create an AI agent that was a customer service bot or agent, all right, well, we're going to have to feed it a lot of information. And so, currently you can upload like a PDF. Soon you'll be able to just tell us your website. We'll scrape all the content and, essentially fill your brain or your knowledge base with that. So it really just depends on like what's the capacity or what actually is the agent's role and job. And for right now, it's just, pieces of that, of that funnel. Booking a meeting, qualifying a lead, maybe it's a customer support agent, but you got to back it up with all the knowledge or else it's dumb. It doesn't know, right?
So maybe like let's peer forward on how AI maybe first changes, continues to change your world. I think we're in this kind of weird spot where, you've got chatbots that lots of people are using,
Yeah.
but frameworks with workflow and Boolean equations where you can actually do conditional logic and stuff is harder, right? You got things like LangChain and maybe even N8N and some of the other platforms that are starting to do this. But like the promise is there. It's just like, do we have the tools? And then is the data in a format that you can do this and really create some scale in this? I think everybody sees the promise. There's a gap today in the operational execution of that.
Yeah, I would agree. Like I've gotten some courses on N8N and I'm on X and I'm seeing these amazing, funnels that people are building. And, when you get into it, it's like, what's the data set thing mean?
Right.
And so there's just a lot of like it's difficult to get those things set up. Right. And so the way, and really this gets to like really our vision for the product and sales message is it should be an easy button. And so years ago, I saw guy named Vern Harnish who wrote a book called Scaling Up, with EO. And he, asked everyone in the crowd, he's like, hey, what business are you guys in? Right? What business do you think you're in? And everyone's like, I'm in transportation. I'm in saving lives. Everyone's like, saying, it's getting deeper and deeper as, everyone responds back. And ultimately he's like, look, you're in the easy button business, right? You go on Amazon, you click a button, boom, like magic, your chair shows up. And like Uber, you click a button and a cab shows up. So now with AI, you have this like, how do you get to this end outcome result? And that could be an easy button. And so all that messy middle of what you're talking about and setting up all the workflows and everything, as a business owner, you can set up a lot of those automations, right? And do it behind the scenes, but the user should just click a button and get the result. And so it's like, how do you move to the easy button? Because that's what people want. They really just want the end outcome. And so there's this whole idea. There's a great blog post on Reforge called Product Market Fit Collapse. And the idea with this is, AI comes in and, you have these companies that have essentially built and architected and supported their product for years to solve the end outcome. But along the way, you have to do all these sort of steps to do it. And that's what the product does. And then AI comes in and says, oh, that's really cute because now in one click, we can give you that outcome. And so that's this whole idea of a lot of these companies, this product market fit collapse and these new startups come in and solve the problem quicker, faster, easier. So there certainly is some disruption around that. I think anyone who's building software is trying to think, how do we get ahead of this? Or who behind me is going to be creating something easier that I know that, man, we need to do, but we're a little strapped for team and support, but a small company can come in and sort of do that. So, I think it's a really interesting time and just seeing a lot of these companies start up and move quick and grow fast on the backs of AI. So, yeah.
So one of the things I guess I have a hypothesis on that I love your opinion on is I think that product management or the way we think about product needs to be rethought. I see a lot of legacy companies, I'll pick on Salesforce, they basically have a legacy kind of workflow about how you use CRMs, and then they basically add, AI to it. And, a lot of it strikes me as if I design this from first principles with AI to think about in the end user, would I end up with Salesforce? And I think about this, and I think it's a huge change in the way that we think about product is instead of a bolt-on to an existing kind of workflow process that we've already been doing for years and years and years, we have to rethink that. And I think the startup world has a great opportunity to reinvent that if they can really start thinking about it in a different paradigm. And so I don't know if that resonates with you but I do think that like for startups in the next 10 years, this is where the opportunity lies. I think that the legacy companies are going to be slow because they have a vested interest in their experience and their population, and it's going to be hard for them to reinvent. Whereas nimble people that are building, entrepreneurs that are building, if they rethink this, there's an opportunity to kind of turn this over.
Yeah, and look, a large company has investors and revenue and employees and all the baggage that goes with it, and so they don't want to kill the golden goose. And so, I remember seeing a post, might have been by Kieran, I think it was the VP of marketing at HubSpot, and he says we needed to disrupt ourselves before someone else would. And so like that is something I think about all the time. I'm like, guys, what do we need to do? How are we going to disrupt ourselves, regardless of whether that product is good and it generates revenue or that feature, but does it really get the end outcome? How do we disrupt that? And so we're just constantly thinking, how do we get to this easy button? How do we disrupt ourselves before someone else does? Because someone will. And unless you sort of are thinking how you can put yourself out of business, you're not going to innovate in the way that you really need to. And so it does become tough when you do have a company and you have employees and families. Are you willing to sort of kill it in order to
cannibalize your business?
Yeah, cannibalize it and in order for the future. And that's a really, really tough decision. But you could see that a lot of companies that have failed to innovate on the backs of that have died, right? You look at Kodak, you look at a lot of these larger companies. Maybe they had the innovation there, but they really weren't thinking, or maybe they didn't have any of the innovation. And so, that cycle just took 100-something years. But in startups, now that cycle is taking a couple of years, right? Yeah. So, we're always thinking, how do we disrupt ourselves? What are we going to do? And, there's a lot of cool things that we've done over the years to just try and stay ahead of the curve. We're really good on the innovation side, and yeah, it's always a challenge, but it's also fun because you can constantly shift and change and create new product and try and solve problems.
So I think that's partly culture, and I mean, obviously that starts at the top. But like how being in a change environment, I think some people thrive in that. Where they're basically saying, I keep, constantly evolving and reinventing myself. There's some people that are afraid of that. Generally, they don't spend a lot of time in startups. But like, how do you create that culture of just continuous reinvention and kind of pushing the norm, right? Because there's so many pressures, right? There's 50 number one priorities in a startup, is what it feels like. And basically, if you're constantly trying to reinvent yourself, how is that a priority? And so maybe just talk about like your philosophy and how to do that.
Yeah. One of the core values we have in the company is continuous improvement, right? And Kaizen is at the core of that. And so Kaizen is, how are we just continuously improving and, micro improvements on the product? How are we continuing to innovate there? We've been really good on the product side, not so great on some of the other parts of the business. I think with marketing, it's a little bit more mechanical, with product, a little bit more mechanical to constantly improve. And so, we just have an internal process to where, I'm out in the market, I'm seeing certain things or ideas, and how are we curating our products? I think the cool thing, we integrate into HubSpot. HubSpot is always opening up APIs, which for me, it's really opportunity. Hey, if we can integrate here, what's the new opportunity? Oh, there's a new API on this company, and it just unlocked this new opportunity. Oh, that could be an add-on into our overall ecosystem. So I'm just actively always trying to search within our industry, outside of the industry. But internally for the team is we're just going through a curation process of, hey, where's the product at right now? What isn't working? And just going through our products, seeing the inefficiencies. I have something I call a friction list. And so with the friction list, a friction list really is, hey, what are parts of the business or parts of a process that are just stupid, that should be eliminated? This takes 15 clicks. Why doesn't it take one, right? And it's not on the team to figure out how to fix it. It's really on them to just say, hey, this sucks. Here's a Loom video. Here's a screenshot. Figure it out, right? And so that's been a slow work in process. There's a really great book I read. It's by Bob Sutton. It's called The Friction Project. And phenomenal book. Loved it. And because it's Kaizen, right? It's like, how do you sort of install Kaizen? And so for us, a friction list internally is that backlog of efficiency or inefficiencies. And slowly you add those things to sprints, or you put it into a backlog, and now you can start to create a more efficient team and operationally efficient team. So I don't know if it answers your question, but that's something that we've certainly done to just get better I think our process from a product perspective is everything we do is going to make the product better. That's what's great about software, is every investment in creating a better product, pays those dividends. Now, hopefully you're choosing the right product and features that will, decrease churn, increase customers, right? Increase ARPA. But over time, that 1%, 1%, 1% really creates a beautiful compound.
Yeah, I agree with it. And I think I'd like to talk further on this. I mean, we created an initiative that's kind of similar where we said everybody needs to be 30 to 40% more productive. Let's create your friction list, to use your term. And basically, what are you doing that's manual that you would like to automate? And it was pretty eye-opening, right? There's a lot of just, stuff where you're like, man, that guy is really smart. He should be working on some higher end stuff, and he shouldn't be spending 7 hours a week doing that. And if we could automate that, then we free up his time to do some more value add type stuff. And so I do think that's good. I do think that the culture of just continuous improvement is the right way to think about it, because your environment's always changing, right? Like, I mean, we went from Concur, I think my first year they were $6 or $7 million. And my last year was 1.2 billion. And like every year it was just different, right? Like every year you kind of threw out 50% of what you knew last year because you had to reinvent it. Problem is you didn't know which 50%. And so, but we always said, you got to get better because the environment keeps changing. And I think that's one of the things that, like, when you look at companies that scale, they have to have that philosophy. And you're going to hit plateaus where it's a systems, it's people, it's a process. And maybe I'd like to pivot a little bit into that to like say that culture of continuous improvement is a really good foundation for learning how to scale, because you're going to have problems. And if you can identify them earlier so that they are proactively being solved versus reactionary, like I've been at this for a while and something's just not working, you're thinking about it as a system that you can continuously evolve.
Yeah. One of the recent projects here is, we have a lot of documentation in Confluence. And to be honest, it's actually quite overwhelming. So when the team comes in, they're like, wow, this is the most documented company I've ever been a part of. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? And, most people, when they get into it, it's like, whoa, you guys document everything, which is great. However, it's also very overwhelming. So right now, I'm like, we need to build out just really true SOPs, because there's part of processes that, customer support or customer success, do we have a documented, like, real process for that? And more importantly, is that process actually the right process? A while back, I had a team member record what they were doing. I'm like, I'm not here to like look at your work. I'm not like, I'm not going to fire you because I want to see what you're doing. What I'm looking for is the inefficiencies in what you're actually doing, because you've been doing this a long time. And there are things that you're doing that you don't even know. It's just status quo. And it's like the destruction of status quo across a company. No one is thinking in the terms of the improvement. So just record your screen. I'll watch it. I'll take a look at it. And I can pick out 5 or 6 things that we will build or automate or make better and improve, so we can completely, eliminate that part of your job, right? In the sense to where it's spending 7 hours, like to your example. So let's just go through this process. How are we going to do that? So, this now we're really getting into, let's build true SOPs, create an owner for that, and constantly improve that SOP, because the way in which somebody's doing it might be a great way, might be the wrong way. We don't know, but let's document the way that we're doing it and let's improve upon that. That's, gosh, I went down that little rabbit hole there. I don't know what else.
No, I think it's good.
What you
like I didn't bring back. I just recently had an experience where I'm helping out a company, and they just got over 10 million in ARR, so they're moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
And they are Confluence heavy, like lots of great content. And I was talking to the person that runs CSMs, and she was talking about, as I move people up, like so many of the questions about like integration points. And so we went and looked at what we did in Confluence, and like the amount of detail by integration is incredible. But like getting to that data when you're on the phone with a customer or you got a question from an email. And so all they did was build an agent front end for it. And basically real time, just being able to sit there and say, let me just ask the question, and I get the information from Confluence back. And so like that's, I think,
Love
a
it.
form factor where it's like the content's there and it's well structured. The data is really good. It's just how do I put an interface that allows that individual not to have to do 50 clicks to get to it. And so
Yeah.
I do think that's where a lot of this is coming. And like that amount of friction, she basically told me 2.5 hours a week per CSM, just on integration type questions. And she
Yeah.
said, then they come to me as the manager because I've been here a long time and I can answer them. And so she's like, if that took off 3 hours of my time and 2.5 hours of theirs, okay, cool. And all we had to do was build a front end to that basically digests that and gave it to them in a natural language search where the LLM could search that up and service where they'd already done the hard work in Confluence.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Like I've heard that before, and just hearing it again it's just confirmation. Like give our internal team what they need to do their jobs better. And so, yeah, I'm gonna take a note. We got to do that because we have so much documentation, and we get all these Slack messages, and internally it does cause a lot of noise. Where we already have the answer. In fact, it does get I wouldn't even say sometimes annoying, but someone will ask a question and my co-founder will be like, hey, it's in Jira. It's right here. It's in Confluence. It's right here. And so, okay, well, what actually is the better thing to do is we'll just serve it up on an AI agent. That's really smart. I like that.
And I think if you just stop and think about like every discipline in your organization, especially even at that level, like everybody's asking for it. You've spent so much time documenting this stuff. The problem becomes do you get lazy and continue to use this? And now the question is, do you build the next Confluence page? That's what their challenge with is like saying, is there somebody actually who's going to build the next one and the next one and the next one so that can feed the LLM? And then do we have a process to continue to do that? Because there's value in it. And now we're serving it up with a less friction way. So how do we go do that? And so it's interesting dynamics, but I do think that's a super simple one where this company has just kind of said, we have a similar philosophy. We need to scale our people by 25%. We're going to start looking at these problems within each discipline. And this was an easy low-hanging fruit that they're doing across the board.
Yeah, that's interesting. There is a cool tool I just started using. It's called a Whisper Flow. And so the challenge when you're creating any sort of documentation, really anything, is you got to put down words. And so Whisper Flows, you just click FN on your keyboard, you talk, and it transcribes, and boom, it's done. So that alone saves so much time because what's in my head and what I need to type on paper, two different things. So that we've had our team use that. It's really added so much more pleasantry and quickness to the speed within the team. So adding these little things along the way, I think, make a big impact.
Yeah, I use AudioPen, so exact same thing, right? And it'll either transcribe it directly, or you can basically say, make this better. So if I got a bunch of jumbled thoughts, it'll organize it way better than I gave it to them. And then basically you can use it in whatever format you want. And so what's interesting about this, Chris, today is like I feel like it's incumbent on us or you to like basically figure out all these different tools and stitch it together. Over time, I think there's going to be more and more continuity and hopefully API structures that just allow us to pick and choose these different tools in our workflow to make this easier. Today, I feel like it's a little bit wild, wild west where you got to try out a bunch of tools, you got to figure it out, you got to build it into your own workflow. And I think people, if they're not this inquisitive and they're not experimenting, then it's just like hard. And like lots of people, I'd say like, hey, just wait till the dust settles and then just tell me what I need to go do. I'll take a class. And you're like, well, you're going to be behind if you actually do that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Like I find myself with HubSpot, right? HubSpot, great CRM. We use it all. It's our tool of choice. And I was thinking, how much time am I spending doing this in HubSpot? Could their agent really sort of help with that? And so there is this fear of diving into the AI side of things. And so what I have done is just experimented with, well, can AI really get that done? And cool, I'm going to have AI do it all. Hey, make this template for me. And just sort of these experiments of, I know nothing. I'm going to have AI create the template, write this, and I'm just going to talk to it. The other day, I was talking with ChatGPT because I'm building out a framework for auditing a business on textiles. And I was talking to ChatGPT just back and forth. I'm like, hey, you are an agent and you're on the other side. Let's do a role play. And just had the role play. No, say this, say that. And it just made an entire script. Amazing, right? Hey, team, let's go and try this. And so being able to sort of create on the fly, these structures, these systems, these templates, it's really been a good tool to prototype. Even with Lovable and Replit, had a lot of ideas. It's on the backlog in Sprint in 4,000. And so now I can hack away and build something. Hey guys, this is what I'm thinking. Hey guys, that's what I want to create. Hey, how do we get to here? Oh, in fact, and just the inquisitive side of things, right? I'm going to learn, and I'm just going to hack with Lovable to come up with an idea. And I was talking to my CFO earlier. How do we create a culture, an environment for people to fail and to feel okay with failing? And I remember Google, they would set out time. So, hey, on Friday, I don't know if you have any experience or you did that in the past, but how do you create a culture to where everyone is okay with trying new things, testing, failing, FAFO, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I think it's an important one. I think you need to create an environment where it's safe to fail. And I think early days at Concur and even some of the companies I've been involved in, we've tried to create some of that space. And I guess this kind of goes back to how you want your culture, right? If you're telling people what to go do, they're not going to experiment, right? That's just not what they're going to go do. But if you basically have a framework of principles that says this is, if you do the right things here and you experiment and you screw up, we're fine, right? You tried to do the right thing, it just didn't work out 10% of the time. And so I do think that's part of what it is like you have to give them an empowerment so that they feel like, if I do try something and I learn from it, but I kind of adhere to the principles, then I'm good. And I just read a book that I was talking to another founder about. It was called The Team of Teams, and it was General McChrystal. And so he was talking about kind of the surge that he had in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I'm not a big military history guy, but what he was talking about was, in general, military is a command and control structure. And if you take out the top guy, then basically the bottom falls out. When we got into these other environments, they're loose cells and they don't get a lot of direction from a leader. And we had to basically rebuild it where we basically drove more authority and ownership further and further down in the organization and gave way more transparency to everybody. And I just read that book and I was like, that's what you want startups to be, right?
Yeah,
you basically, if you're the leader, you can set direction, but what you really want is people empowered below you to not look for you to make decisions, but to basically drive and see opportunity and fill it. And they're going to be successful, and there's going to be failures. But if they learn something and it adhere to what you think your culture is all about and your principles, you're going to be fine. And so, and I think that's what scales. And ultimately, I think one of the things we did well at Concur was I got in early, and I was a young kind of professional, and I got to the exec staff. But the only way I did that was the ability to let me learn and try some new things. And I didn't nail it every time. I did some things wrong, but I grew. And I think that's the type of culture and alignment you want for for a lot of environments.
Yeah. It's, the way in which you actually execute on that is mission, vision, core values. One of the things that one of our core values is keep it real and conversational. And so our emails real, we're a texting company. And so the challenge is you have core values, but how do you install those across the team? We're a remote company. It's been a challenge to get that. So I need to learn more on how to execute on that. It is one thing where, from the top, we're sort of, I wouldn't say a command and control culture, but in the sense of we're sort of shining the light on where we're going with things. But I would love everyone to participate. So, it's I would love to learn from that and see how other companies are actually executing.
I think that there's a lot of debate on this a little bit. I think Concur was pretty good at saying our executive staff was very clear about what success looked like and what failure looked like. And then they put people in roles that could figure out the execution. And you got paid for execution. Towards the end of my career, 30% of my compensation was guaranteed. The rest of it was based on performance. Right. And part of that, a large portion of it wasn't just the division I was running, it was basically the entire company. So I was locked arms with everybody else because if I nailed my stuff, I'm going to get 50% of what I would owed. If the company got it all and I got my piece of it, then we did very well. And so you got to get the alignments figured out. And then I think you have to figure out what is it in my company that I'm really looking for? Do I want leaders that are figuring out, kind of where to go, or do I want leaders that actually are executing? And I think in our world, that's what we kind of did was we'll be very clear about what execution and success looks like. You just have to go figure out a way to do it. And that model worked out really well, but you gravitate and grow a certain type of person to do that.
Yeah. I love it.
Well, it's good. Let's pivot to the next one, which is I think that you have bootstrapped your company, and we have a lot of commonality from that standpoint. We want to grow businesses that are sustainable, that basically are not trying to build a pitch deck to go see an investor and get a bunch of money. That may be part of the journey, but I think the fundamentals are, did you build a reasonable product that is based on an ICP and a customer that actually wants your product and is willing to pay? And if the answer is yes, then you have options, right? You can start to generate revenue. And then if you want to raise capital because it's worth raising capital, that's great, but you are in control. I think we've seen a lot of examples where people have given up that control, and especially when interest rates went from zero to something else. Lots of private equity and VCs freaked out because their portfolio value changed and their IRR to their investors changed. So their behaviors to the founders dramatically changed. Right. And that is not a good place to be. And so maybe talk a little bit about your philosophy and kind of why you took the path you have.
I took the bootstrap path because that's what the option was, right? So
the honest answer.
Yeah, I mean, look, there is no other option, and so you just figure it out and you try and you build, and so I actually did raise a small amount of capital. This is 2011, 2012, $90,000 for Call Loop, and I got to say, even raising that small amount of money, to me, it was a lot. It really changed the way that I felt, one, about myself, about the business, and not being able to perform at these, unicorn statuses. And they were friends, right? They weren't VCs and they weren't hounding me. And so, but it still was very stressful, even that small amount of cash, because I want to perform. I want to make sure that, hey, I'm taking somebody's money and I want to win. And I actually did go, this is a long time ago, but I went to San Francisco and I pitched at Mobile Beat. This is a long time ago. In front of 300 something investors, and I completely bombed on stage. And I was like, the poster boy in the beginning, and then as soon as I pitched, everyone was like, "Oh, stay away from him." I didn't know what I was doing. To be honest, the whole investment world to me was a whole new thing, like raising money and doing this. And so for a while, I thought, I need to raise money. I went to San Francisco, I'm meeting with investors, and I wasted a lot of time. And I was like, man, I don't want to do this, but I felt I had to do it. And I think for a long time, business owners, entrepreneurs, startups were sold that you have to go this path. And so when I started, that was the path. I had to bootstrap, and I had to get it to profitability, and I had to sort of make those sacrifices. I could have gone a bank loan. I could have done all that sort of stuff, but I didn't choose to do that. And so I think it's just changed. Now creating a software company, you can get to product market fit very quickly, right? With a very small team that's ambitious, that's sacrificing and moving fast, getting to product market fit, getting some customers, and in your case, like getting to a small seed round. Hey, get to a product and scale that business, right? You decide whether you want to go and raise additional capital, take on debt, whatever it is to continue to fund that. I think today, building sustainable software companies, if you're going to build some unicorns, it may take additional capital to get there. But if you want to build a multi-million-dollar business, you've got a nice exit in the future, you can do it. And it just has become a lot easier. In the past, we have to build websites and code, and you still have to code now, but it was a lot harder. And so even from the investor profile, I'm sure you're seeing it, is investors probably aren't touching businesses that don't have revenue, that don't have product market fit. And maybe that's changed, but I certainly see it, where a lot more companies are getting to those stages. And then if they want to raise money, they can go down that path. And it sort of changes the investors as well, which is, founders get to a stage and then they don't want to take money. What's your take on that? Where are you seeing sort of the market shift?
Yeah, I mean, I think so I belong to an angel network here in the region. And, I think that before when interest rates are zero, we were looking at a lot of different stuff, and because there was competition to, like, if you wanted to invest, you had to play that game. I think
Mm-hmm.
today, nobody even gets into the angel network funnel unless they've got a product and some sort of revenue. Like, you have to
Yeah.
show some level of traction. So and our valuations have gone way down, right? I would say that early valuations are down in comparison to where they were 18, 24 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a massive change. I do think that even in the private equity growth and VC world, there's maybe a lot more focus on getting to profitability over growth at any cost.
Yeah.
And so we've seen this even with portfolio companies where they're kind of saying, "Hey, look, your burn rate's too high. We'll take some of that off the top line for you to get a path to profitability." And I think that's been healthy for everybody. I
Yeah.
had one company that I worked with quite a bit where they missed their numbers, basically 2 quarters, and they got a pretty big beat down. And then they went 2 years where they got super capital efficient, and
Mm-hmm.
lots of the numbers in their business got better. And I think what that guy would say was, "I raised $25 million. I probably wasn't very capital efficient with it." Like, he would
Right.
regret the amount of money that he raised and burned inefficiently. Whereas when he got kind of slapped, then he kind of said, "Oh man, I wish I had some of that money back because I would have done something very different with it." And so
Yeah.
there is some, like, lessons to be learned about, like, operationally scaling. And I think it papered over a lot of problems that he didn't want to solve. But when
Mm.
you pull that back and you have to go do it, and I think the bootstrapping or seed strapping, you see those problems very, very clearly because you're
Yeah.
dealing with them every single day. So I do think there's a whole bunch more clarity in this. And the last thing I'd say on this is, you brought it up multiple times. Like, there's a lot of room between a lifestyle business and a billion-dollar business. And I think there's a lot of good businesses that fit in that. And I think VCs are, like, basically saying, or they have traditionally, it's either $1 billion or bust. And I think
Right.
there's more and more people that are kind of starting to fill in the middle that says, "Hey, if I get a decent IRR and a decent return," there's a lot of them in the middle that are actually good vertical niche B2B software companies that we can make a portfolio really work. Maybe not at large scale where you're spending billions and billions of dollars in investment, but these smaller funds that I think are sitting in the middle, I do think they're starting to rethink some of their thought process. And so
Yeah.
it's interesting. I think that I'd like to see less investment in a lot of these companies. I think it drives a lot of bad behavior, both from the founders and sometimes the financial institutions that invest in them.
Yeah.
And they lose control. They get booted out. Their equity gets diluted. There's just too many sad stories. And so we look at it and say, "Hey, if you created your business, took minimal cash, and you sold for $80 million versus you took a bunch of capital and you sold for 500, your output may be less than the other one, right? Just because
Right.
of your dilution in that process."
Yeah. 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 I mean, being bootstrapped, like, we've had to be efficient. We're a profitable company. It took a little bit to get there, and investing in the product and business, and, people is the biggest expense for us. And before, it was like, man, hiring a $75,000 person was expensive. And now 150 is sort of like where we're at, So it's just changed, as we're growing.
Yeah.
But we also realize, hey, we have to invest in great people to get to that next stage. So the mindset of bootstrapping, at some point, either you have to lift it and get away from it. And so in many respects, we have the core foundation of being capital efficient and making good decisions and getting rid of things that are just not working and are costly. At some point, we got to turn it on. And so we're at that point where, all right, like, let's go and let's invest in the right things. But we've built a culture to where we've respected the dollar, and everyone in the team knows that. So I always ask the team, like, "Hey, who in the company can spend money?" And it's like, "Well, I think you and Sergey." I'm like, "Yes." But how many people in the business can actually bring in business? And it's everyone in the company. And so everyone is empowered to bring in business, but we really want to make sure that there's only one or two people in the company that can spend it. And we're, very efficient with that. And so, but again, you get to a certain level, and now, all right, what do we need to do to invest in it? Maybe we're going to burn a bit, bring in new people, but the opportunity is for us to 10x the company. So, but I don't want to do it having a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So that's the other side of raising money. I don't like that feeling I had.
Expectation.
Yeah, that small amount of capital, but man, you take in a couple $1,000,000, it certainly changes things.
It does. Well, I think, Chris, that's a good place to stop. I appreciate you kind of sharing your journey and some of your lessons learned, as well as learning a little bit more about the company you're running today. If people wanted to like contact you or follow you or anything like that, like what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, they can go to salesmsg.com, check out Salesmsg. If they need texting, we can certainly help. And then find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty, I'm on LinkedIn. That's where the best place to find me. But Chris Brisson, and that's it. But Todd, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. I learned some good things here, so thank you so much.
Well, good. Well, I did too. So I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks again.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for listening to Startup Stories from the Treehouse. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, follow, or subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And if you found our conversation helpful, leave a review. It really helps other founders discover our show. For more insight and episode summaries, don't forget to subscribe to the Wildfire Lab Substack. We appreciate your support and can't wait to share more stories with you next time.